Hello. I hope you've enjoyed the day so far. Do I have to activate this? There we go. I'm assuming that the right arrow makes the slide progress forward. Okay. Hi, my name is Bryan. That was a great introduction, Kate. Thank you very much. Today, I titled this WIP shoes, work in progress shoes. The life and times of 3D printed shoes. Because I believe that I'm running my little shoe business in the same way that a software developer would kind of release software, in a more contemporary manner, where you don't wait till you have a highly polished object to kind of release it into the wild and get feedback from it. Because I have the backing of the technology of 3D printing to prototype and make with the same technology, and then get quick feedback from people wearing the products, and then really quickly adapt. So first I'm going to elaborate on my architecture background and kind of what's the relevance and the connection between architecture and footwear. Does anyone here think it's obvious that there's an obvious connection between architecture and footwear? Not a single person thinks it's obvious? All right, 1, 2, okay, good. If we just simplify what it means to make a shoe and what it means to create architecture, you have two big responsibilities. You have an aesthetic responsibility, and what I believe you have is a public safety responsibility. So it has to look good, and it can't kill you. And it's good that I started out training as an architect, and I've been working as an architect for nearly 15 years now, around the world. This is a slide I created just to show I've been very lucky in my career to work across a number of scales of projects, whether it's an exhibition booth or a house or an airport or a skyscraper or a new city. Next slide, please. Oh, it does. Great. Boom. The very obvious connection between architecture and high heel shoes. All you do is flip those skyscrapers upside down and you put them underneath the heel. Who saw that? Yeah, good. I saw what I did there. So, architecture is made by a lot of people. And shoes, even though they're a small product, conceivably could be made by a number of people even around the world. And so you have the similarity of different trades coming together to create one product. And so that's already a very fundamental link between architecture and footwear. The whole interest with, my interest in using 3D printing technology is that I believe that we're living in a day and age where it's becoming increasingly easier to get the raw imagination or your thought from inside your head and get it out into the real world. As close as we can to just taking a snapshot of what we're thinking and just seeing it in front of us is 3D printing and other robotic manufacturing technologies. I originally used 3D printing technology and other digital fabrication technology for making architectural models, because I've always been the kind of guy that understood that we can imagine far more, well, let's just say crazier things than we're prepared to make with our own hands. And for those who know me, I'm always at my studio and I'm working all the time, but I'm actually extraordinarily lazy. So if I can find a machine that can do something for me, then I'm going to go and become friends with that machine, and we're going to try to collaborate. I got into shoes through a dead architect. I'll explain. I was in architecture school, and there was a competition to design shoes. We had a fashion school. I was the only one outside of fashion to enter it. And then when we did the research on the guy who started the brand that's putting on the competition, it emerged that he was himself a famous architect. And after World War II, moved around a lot, eventually went to the United States. And he was one of the first criticizers of the modern day and age that we're living in and the way that clothing is designed. For example, our feet aren't symmetrical, but shoes might be made symmetrical and things like that. So really my entry into footwear comes from a legacy of people outside of footwear who are making comments on the making of footwear, and exactly how modern and technologically advanced are we if we're being slaves to simply design. So, in case you're wondering, that's how I got into shoes. I won that competition, worked in China for a year as an architect, came to London. Because of the proximity to the European continent, there's just a plethora of opportunities here, and I got my first collaboration here to do high heel shoes, and that was that slideshow that you just saw there, that I call the heavy metal series. And I'll show you some detailed photos of it. So the process, it is pretty straightforward. At best, it's linear. So everyone here knows what CAD is, computer-aided design? Now you do. 3D is how I abbreviate 3D printing. So the great thing about having a 3D printer in your studio is that one machine is going to be the tool that you use to kind of test your ideas out, but it's also going to be the machine that you're going to use, well, that I have the confidence to use to actually make a final product. And you can get stuck in quite a little loop there between the CAD and the 3D printing. And then the reason my shoes are comfortable and walkable and danceable is because I don't 3D print the whole shoe. So I do all the leather work by hand, and I had to invent an insole to kind of connect the new technology of making shoes with the traditional technology of making shoes. So you could spend a lot of time in that CAD 3DP loop, but as soon as you get to assembly, you might figure out that something fundamental has to change about something that you've designed. But then you get intuitive with it, and hopefully you've got good design experience behind you. So there's a lot of changing, and I was thinking to myself, maybe this is too small, but that's okay. Don't look too closely. These are any numbers of tests. So when you're designing in software, you don't have a desk with limited space with paper piling up on it. So you have this universe where you could just create something where you're looking at and then just move it over, and then create something else, move that over, create something else. So the pressure is on you to learn to be organized inside a software when you're designing with it. But the design process is traditional. You can't just stand in front of a computer or a 3D printer and just go at it and expect a great result from the beginning. There's still kind of this process that you have to take the idea out of your head and get it onto paper. So these are computer-generated images. This is spider heels from my heavy metal series. It's one of the first high heels I've designed. And I have this terrible, maybe it's not that big of a problem, but when I get a new technology, I don't kind of get warm with it and dip my toes into the water. I kind of just jump into the most expensive deep end and try to achieve something that NASA would want to achieve with the technology, but with making shoes. So I went for 3D printing with titanium alloy for my first 3D printed shoe. That image on the bottom is what the computer spits out. Every 3D printer has its own software that analyzes your 3D model and then slices it into the layers that the 3D printer will then make layer by layer. And so the brilliant thing about designing in the computer and, the brilliant thing about 3D printing is you can't use it unless you design something in software. And this is something in the way right now of getting more 3D printers into people's homes, which is something that's happening. But as a designer with experience, with some kind of knowledge of structures, and just the bravery to just say, yeah, it should work, there isn't any loss of data or information from the 3D model that you make and how the software that slices it analyzes it, and then what you actually get. So the left side image is computer generated. And that's a photo that I took because I was just so happy to receive these really shiny metal-looking objects with some Council of State flats in the back. It's a good juxtaposition, I think. So what you see in the computer is definitely what you get in the real world, which is one of the most exciting things ever. I'll briefly introduce, and then we're going to get into some videos of robots making stuff. I don't exclusively use 3D printing. Don't hate me. I also use other robots to make things. I was doing 2 collections concurrently because before I was finished with one collection, another designer found out and then got me on board for a collaboration. So I was doing my first 2 high heel footwear collections at the same time, which is a little stressful because you want to learn from one kind of project before you move on to another one, hopefully. But really, that wasn't a problem. But where it's expensive to make one shoe out of titanium, all of a sudden the theme for this collaboration lent itself to using plywood, which comes as a flat sheet material. You cut little parts out, and you can sculpt it. So you can fit in multiple pairs of shoes into one sheet of plywood. So I'm going to point out butterfly heels, and I'm really proud of this design because I entered that Red Dot Design Award, which is what Apple goes for, 3M, BMW, Mercedes, all the big product manufacturers, they always go and they always win these awards. So I kind of just show up on the scene and then get involved in these kind of communities. And that's something that's really helped me out to kind of get my profile up, not just from being a designer, but also being a kind of thought leader in an academic sense. So, does anyone here know what a CNC machine is? Yeah? Okay. In its simplest form, it's a drill bit that's controlled by a computer in at least 3 axes, which means it moves left to right, which is your x-axis. It moves forward and back, which is your y-axis, and then up and down, your z-axis, or z. My shoes are substantially 3D as objects. And the 3-axis mill is actually very limiting. And if you want to do a sphere, you'd imagine that you'd put in a block of material, cut out half of the sphere, and then you have to flip the whole thing and do the other half. So that's a very strenuous workflow. However, the cool thing about digital fabrication technology is that it's extendable. So you can build things for the robot, so its functionality can be extended to your desire. So I built a machine for the machine. I essentially built this jig, this formwork, to use the 3-axis mill as a 5-axis mill. Okay, so the picture before you saw a little block, okay? So there's a snug fit for it to come in to its space in the formwork. Much better, thank you. So for many of you, is this the first time you're seeing a CNC machine do its thing? I mean, even a laser cutter, I've been using it for years. I'll still stand in front of it and just look at it because it's hypnotizing. You're just seeing this machine just doing something. And so this is the joy of having a vision to create things digitally and then commandeer what are these, fabrication machines to kind of carry out your visions. So this took a while. It took 3 days. So here's fast forwarding. And now you understand that's the sole bed. Here we are doing one side of the shoe before it has holes in it. It's a very hypnotizing process. And it's very dirty as well. Here are some insole parts being excavated. And you get these funky middle steps when you're using digital fabrication technology. I kind of wanted to leave the shoe in this state because I just thought this is so weird. And catwalks do like to make little kind of oh my god statements. Nonetheless, I moved forward, and then it started looking like this. Now I'm going to move into split heels, which are my commercial offering. So before designing my 3rd collection, which is split heels, the kind of footwear that I made was really artistic, technological expressions, and it didn't have a target kind of customer or audience in mind. There was no budgetary constraints. There was just, it's possible. I have an opportunity. I'm going to make it. I was fortunate enough to strike a partnership with one of the big 3D printing manufacturers, and they gave me my first 3D printer. And so at that point, I couldn't ignore the opportunity to actually bring future shoes to people who can actually buy them today, and not just for perhaps emirate princesses, which I haven't met yet. But what's the next slide? Okay, so with getting my own 3D printer, all of a sudden I could do a production line, and all of a sudden I can do more than one thing. I don't have to outsource anything. All the previous collections, the other two, I could never afford that technology. One of those machines to 3D print the heavy metal series might cost £1 million. And I don't own the CNC machine. And the frustration is when you know these technologies and you go to people who have the kit, the machines, they're going to charge you some ridiculous rate per hour just to push the on button. So this was a godsend for me. So originally, I called them split heels because I was trying to split up materials and that you can mix and match. But then it moved forward to just being all plastic. Now, this plastic is special. It's petrochemical free. So it's bioplastic. It's made from corn or sugarcane, depending on where in the world it's made. And the good news is the other plastic material that I can print with is ABS plastic. And that's your traditional plastic, and that is petrochemical based. And so it just turns out that the biomaterial is actually way more lustrous than the more harmful material. So I got into a collaboration. I had a PR agent at the time who was also the PR agent for this up-and-coming apparel designer. And there's this competition during London Fashion Week called Fashion Fringe, and the winner of Fashion Fringe wins essentially £100,000, split between a 4-season, which is a 2-year residency at Somerset House for your studio, which is amazing, and then a lot of mentorship from the industry. So I put the shoes on the catwalk for him. So because I have the technology and I can kind of anticipate, I have the 3D printer, I can anticipate that what I think I want to make is going to work, I get on board with these collaborations. I must be very convincing because very quickly after that, when the question arises, Bryan, can we see a sample? I say, well, it's still being 3D printed. And this was like a 1-month process, and I wasn't really able to get the shoes to the designer until kind of 2 or 3 days before showtime. So he was really stressed out, and I'm surprised he didn't have a heart attack and I'm surprised I didn't have a heart attack because I'm like, I really can't be the reason he loses a chance at 100,000 pounds and launching his career in a nice little limelight. I trucked forward. I gave him the confidence. I said, no, look, it's working. Look, it's going on. I'm printing all these heels. Look how cool this is. It's going to work. It's all good. What's the next slide? This is what happens when you work from your flat, by the way. Can you guys see where the hammer used to be? Futon, technically. Yeah. Originally, I worked from my flat. I mean, you could have a 3D printer in your bathroom if you wanted. Nowadays, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to be in a studio. So, and boy, I mean, if you work from home, you never go to sleep, especially when you have these tight deadlines. Because before doing high heels, that sounds funny. Before doing high heels, I've never done high heels. Before giving the designers the confidence that I can do the high heels for them, I have no previous experience. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But this comes from architecture, this kind of confidence that, well, it's, real materials, it should work. I make my own kind of little factory setup, sun-powered kind of drying systems, very eco-friendly. The fastest 3D printed shoe ever made. Ta-da! I could watch that over and over. Okay, so they finally get the pair of shoes. They look fine. I told them that we're not going to do little buttons like that. I like shoelaces. I really care about comfort and I really care about stability. And so laces are the best way to kind of put a shoe onto your leg so it becomes an extension of your body as opposed to just something dangling underneath you. This is what it looked like for showtime. And I packaged it all up 2 days before showtime. No, 1 day before showtime. I was only able to give them 1 pair of shoes 3 days before showtime. Finally got all the shoes ready, a little over 24 hours from showtime. And I went to sleep. Actually, it was a day and a half before. This is important. I went to sleep, okay? Because you don't sleep very much when you're under the gun in this way. So he calls me. I probably was already asleep for like 2 hours. He calls me and says, "Hey, Bryan, yeah, we're doing the fittings. Everything is going fine. But 2 pairs of heels snapped." I said, "Oh, okay, well, I printed a few of them at the same time." And I asked him, "Did they break in the same place?" He said, yeah. I said, "Okay, great. I'll just print off another pair." So the 3D printer was in my bedroom. So I got out of bed, pushed print, went back to sleep. About 4 hours later, he had 2 other pairs of heels. 30 minutes later, he calls me again. "Hey, Bryan, 4 more pairs snapped." I said, "Really? What do we do?" Showtime, right? 100,000 pounds, launching your career. Burberry CEO is picking the winner. So what do you do? I don't only use 3D printing. I already showed you a pair of shoes that I made using a CNC machine. And the beauty of having gone to architecture school is that architecture schools usually have this kit. They have these machines. And in both architecture schools, both undergrad when I was in Los Angeles and my master's degree here, I was always working in the lab, in the prototyping lab, either the wood shop or, because I'm always making. So I picked up the phone and said, "Carl, don't give me any shit. I'm coming in. I need a big favor. I'm going to cut out some heels." He's like, "All right, cool." This is when I had 24 hours to re-heel 13 pairs of shoes. Now, that means I had to design something for output. That takes time. I had to prepare that 3D model so that the CNC machine could read it and cut out wood. I had to physically go to the school where the machine was. But that was the easy part. There's the slant underneath the sole. I lined up the heel underneath it at an angle, and those are really precise holes to hit. There's 2 holes that I had to drill through. I made this really makeshift jig to kind of just go and drill in at an angle as precisely as I could, but that was really some Mickey Mouse stuff. So here I am burning the midnight oil, just really stressed out, just drilling things. There's no way to test anything. This is the first time I'm making shoes that are going to debut by being walked in, as opposed to debuting a photograph. That's what they looked like on the floor at the studio in preparation for the catwalk show. And this is how they looked on the catwalk. There was a huge fist bump from me in the air saying, "Yeah, I'm a legit shoe designer now." Because before that, my shoes were really experimental, and I'm just thinking, it should work. You know, titanium, it's strong enough, it's going to work. It was at that point where I got the confidence that I needed to kind of carry forward with the idea that I could actually build up a footwear brand based on 3D printing technology as a small player and grow. And this is what the shoes look like today. Now, I picked out black and white just to show a cohesiveness of the collection, but it took Nike how many decades to give the customer control over how to style your shoes. But because your business is new and you're agile, you don't have board members saying what your next moves are for meeting the goals of the company. I can offer customization from the start as a new player on the game. So it doesn't take any more time to tell me that you want a red part or a blue part. So I've developed a plan where if you customize a pair of shoes in a unique color scheme, I name the shoes after you. And I'm saying this so that you guys can hold it against me. I think it would be really cool if the person who designed the shoe actually got a little royalty every time someone bought that color combination. Moving a little closer to co-design. There are some challenges with this 3D printing stuff. There's two big challenges. One is cost of production. Because I'm small time, I have small batch production, things are expensive. So I'm paying 5 times too much for leather. And at the price point that I'm selling at, my competitors, they really have it figured out. So one of the challenges is that the price point of the product has to absorb the higher cost. 2 minutes. The other challenge is consumer conditioning. We've practically been wearing shoes all of our lives. And so it's in our subconscious. And I'm making a shoe that looks different, feels different, is made differently. And so a lot of feedback I get when I invite people to my studio to try on some shoes, see the whole process. They say, wow, I never would have imagined that they're going to feel this comfortable just by the pictures alone. So one of the biggest challenges for getting into fashion with 3D printing is, or footwear, let's say, is that people think it's a plastic toy. And there is no benefit of the doubt with shoes, because even most of the shoes out there, everyone seems to be complaining that they're very uncomfortable. So I definitely don't have the benefit of the doubt on my side. Nonetheless, I truck forward and I'm trying to make the world of footwear innovative, colorful, comfortable, stylish. Thank you very much.